I'm going to ask a sobering question. What is the lowest you have ever felt? It can be sad to dwell on such feelings. One of the most amazing Psalms, fascinating Psalms in the entire set of scriptures that contain the Psalms is Psalm 88. Psalm 88 is perhaps the darkest, lowest, most dreadful expression of despair that I can think of recorded in Scripture. If you read the words, reflecting upon them, or perhaps even singing them, you might even feel somewhat depressed because there is no measure of hope other than at the very start of the psalm, as you can see here, where David says, or rather, Heman the Ezrahite says, Lord, you are the God who saves me. That is about the only expression of hope in this entire psalm. And yet the dilemma comes because as the speaker realizes the true God is the God who saves him, he is up against some of the most darkest moments of his life, or at least he looks back on such a situation. When I look at this psalm, you can see on the right-hand side here, and as I scroll through this psalm, various aspects of it that declare this person's discouragement and despair. At the start of the psalm, he pours out his trouble. He notes different ways about how he cries out to God. He tells God about his suffering, and then he almost accuses God about the way God has treated him. Towards the end of the psalm, you can see several troubling realities that the writer reflects on. I don't want to point out each and every aspect of what I just shared here. You can see in the both the psalm, the colored portions that I've tried to match up with various ideas in parallel on the right-hand side. Perhaps you can look at these and maybe it'll stir some study or further reflection. But I think about Jesus Christ himself because I can hear Jesus praying this prayer of despair as he was about ready to approach the cross. And I can't help but think that the writer here, led by the Spirit of Jesus Christ, is anticipating the suffering that the Messiah that they longed for would indeed one day experience. Sure, perhaps maybe he himself experienced suffering and this despair, but as he reflected on that, I just want to suggest that he was looking forward to the time when the king in David's line that was promised in Psalm 2 would express such suffering at such great degree. We can hear the voice of Jesus speaking through this psalm. If you go to Matthew chapter 26, Jesus is praying and he says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And he tells his disciples, stay here and keep watch with me. Mark chapter 14 says essentially the same thing about what Jesus prays. And if you go to Luke chapter 22, you can read how Luke describes his anguish. Luke 22:42, Jesus says, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And hear this, and being in anguish, Jesus prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. This psalm is fascinating because in contrast to the psalm to come, Psalm 89 is perhaps the lowest point of despair in the entire book of Psalms. And yet when we get to Psalm 89, we will see a complete reversal where the psalm writer will speak immediate joy and praise because of God's love.